It's July 23rd, 2014. A month and a day after my 25th birthday. I'm in between my third and fourth year in the Ph.D. program at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. But I'm not in Chapel Hill on July 23rd. I'm sitting between a stack of moving boxes on my right side, empty bookshelves on my left, the back bedroom of a house in Clarksdale, Mississippi. It's not following along. The back bedroom of a house in Clarksdale, Mississippi. I'm there to start fieldwork for a dissertation that began with the simplest of questions. What's life like for Black folks living in the contemporary rural South, the South that I knew? To answer that question, I decided to go where that South was, back to my home state of Mississippi, to a part of the state, the Mississippi Delta, that if you read the stories and the literature, is defined best by what it don't got.
I found a town which looks, from all appearances from Main Street, like any small town in America. However, if you walk one block in one particular direction, you find a totally different environment. You find basically total squalor. Find a population or community, unfortunately predominantly consisting of Black people who live in conditions that I thought that did not exist still in America. In fact, an infant born in Tunica in 1985 is more likely to die before their first birthday than is a child born in Jamaica, West Indies, which we commonly think of as a developing country.
So you can find this clip on YouTube. It's taken from a 60-minute special focused on Tunica, Mississippi, a town about an hour north of Clarksdale. The screen grab of the Opportunity Game Away article also focuses on Clarksdale, and you should probably be able to see the bottom headline. The point here is that there is this narrative, this very thick and persistent narrative about the Delta, that if you listen or watch or read the literature defined broadly, as I mentioned, suggests that this is a place that we can define, and the Delta here is purple. This is a place that we can define best by what it doesn't have. The year I moved to Clarksdale, 2014, 4 in 10 residents, nearly half of all Black residents, live below the poverty line, and every other metric of economic well-being followed suit: median household income, unemployment, percentage of people not earning a living wage. Institutions vital to Clarksdale's community well-being followed suit too. The local hospital was headed for bankruptcy, school district for state takeover. All of that to say, when I got to that house on Cypress, Clarksdale was a place that was rich with what we might call precarious, insecurity, and uncertainty. And on that first night in the field, I had read those stories, I knew those statistics, but for at least a second, I had stopped thinking about them, about the words that other people had found to talk about the rural Black South. Instead, I took a beat to wonder about my own. I wonder if I'll be able to say something beautiful. I wrote this in my journal as I sat in a wooden open front desk that I had pushed against the window facing all the pretty houses in the formerly all-white, sundown neighborhood of Oakhurst. I wonder if I'll be able to say something beautiful. It was a passing thought, I can tell, because I ain't have much to put with it. Just a few spiraling notes about how long I would be in the field and what I was there to do. It was a passing thought, but it was a thought. I didn't know if it was fully fleshed or not, but I knew it was mine and real. And to be honest, at that point, 2014, between my third and fourth year PhD program at UNC, that passing thought about making something beautiful was the closest that that version of me could come to knowing anything for sure. This photo is from 20 13 and giving a talk at the Carolina Population Center. The year before, 2012, Xandria gonna find this very funny. I had thought about leaving the program to do Teach for America. I had considered following the path of every single man on daddy's side of the family into the military, and I had applied and gotten accepted into divinity school. All bad choices, terrible choices, but at least that version of me didn't see them as all that much terrible than place where I had found myself. I had somehow grown into that particular type of grad student who, despite strong evidence to the contrary, didn't know if I had what it took to fit in this weird place, the academy. The not knowing wasn't about how weird the place was or how cool I thought I was. I don't, I promise. I'm regular. I'm weird, actually. It wasn't a confidence thing either. I had done, in big air quotes, well. I've been funded in my first year by an NIH grant, in my second, third, and fourth year, including first part of my time in Clarksdale by an NSF graduate research fellowship. Classes were fine. One of the 2 comp exams that I took was fine, and we don't talk about the other one. Like, for real, we don't. The not knowing wasn't about that. It wasn't imposter syndrome either. It was invisible man and a little bit of dust tracks on the road. As I see it now, the not knowing was that I was carrying this impulse toward beauty, and I ain't have nowhere to put it. I ain't have nowhere to grow it. I had grown up an artist, drawing and painting on the wall before I was 5. All the Gumtree art festivals, Miss Hartley's 5th grade poetry day, the essay contest I had entered and lost and won and won and lost. All the Saturdays with Mr. Shelton sitting on my left side, telling me every note that I had gotten right and every note that I had gotten wrong and wrong and wrong. Piano lessons. And Sundays, putting them to use like any good Southern black boy at church.
I like to sing. I like them.
So I'm just teaching like my cousin this super simple little riff. And the phase when me and my friends was rappers. That is all y'all need to hear. I had grown up an artist, and then I went to grad school. And when I tell y'all, won't nothing try to smother away your inner artist, like a sociology doctoral program, especially ones that make blue chip sociologists. As the late and eternally great Dr. Jesse Scott said ever so shadily about UNC Chapel Hill, when I told him I'd gotten in, I was to be one of those blue chips, the kind of sociologist who publishes in ASR, AJS, and Social Forces, who knows Marx and Weber and Durkheim and not Du Bois. I will always make that point until it ain't true. Those kinds of sociologists talk about a lot of stuff. They don't talk about making beautiful things. So today, I want to talk about making beautiful things, about doing beautiful science. And I want to do that by telling you the story of how I went from wondering about making something beautiful to seeing beauty as the method of making itself. I've already told you the start of the story. When I finish telling you all of it, you will have heard a lot from W.E.B. Du Bois, a good bit from my book, I Don't Like the Blues. And finally, I'll say a little bit about this idea of dancing on a flaming world. To Earl, thank you for the introduction. I do not give the University of Mississippi credit where they have not earned it. I was not in the MA program at Ole Miss. I was at UNC Chapel Hill. When we met, I think it was maybe 2012 or something like that. Thank you so much for the for the invitation. This is my sabbatical year, which everybody tells me should be the time where I say no to everything. Where I'm from, there's some folks that you don't say no to. So I appreciate you. To Dr. Brunsma, I appreciate you. I remember I had gotten an MFP, ASA MFP, and it was one of those early sessions at ASA, like the very first one, and I think I had been up to like 3 or I was in bad shape. This is when I started drinking coffee. I think it was 2013. And I remember Brunsma came in the room, and it was all of the cohort. I think I saw Shanita earlier, maybe a couple of other folks here. And you threw up our Twitter handles, all this stuff that's like, I had no idea that that we were legible in this way. All of the help with SRE, I appreciate you. To the executive committee, volunteers, hotel staff, folks who made this possible, I appreciate y'all. And to y'all, y'all look good, man. Y'all look good. I appreciate y'all for being here, for spending this 5:30, this late in the day session with me. Session where I'm gonna talk about art. It's funny. Y'all came to the annual meeting of the Southern Sociological Society, probably expecting to hear about sociology. And here I am gonna talk about art. I don't doubt that there are some in this audience who are a little disturbed at the subject of this meeting, particularly at the subject I have chosen. Such people are thinking, how is it that an organization like this, a group of radicals trying to bring new things into the world, a fighting organization which has come up out of the blood and dust of battle, how is it that an organization of this kind can turn aside to talk about art? Or perhaps there are others who feel a certain relief and are saying it is rather satisfactory after all this talk about rights and fighting to sit and dream of something which leaves a nice taste in the mouth. It's June 1926. The NAACP has convened in Chicago for its 17th annual conference. And all the capital I important Black folks are there. Carrie B. Overton, the first Black student, University of Wyoming, is there. The group photo in the center is from her collection. James Weldon Johnson, who gave us Lift Every Voice and Sing. I can't sing, What many of us know as the Black National Anthem, Johnson is there, Carter G. Woodson is there. Woodson, who founded the Association for the Study of Negro Life and History, today known as ASALH, or the Study of African American Life and History. Woodson, who pioneered Negro History Week, which of course we now celebrate as Black History Month. Woodson is not only there, he is the man of the hour, the recipient of that year's Spingarn Medal, the highest honor awarded by the NAACP. And of course, as we would expect of any meeting, capital I, important Black folks in the early 20th century, W.E.B. Du Bois is there. The 58-year-old who himself was awarded the Spingarn distinction in 1920 is slated to say a few things ahead of the conferral of Woodson's award. With some omissions and signifying on my part, these opening lines, this second part of the talk, were the opening lines of Du Bois's remarks back in 1926. He continued, "Let me tell you that neither of these groups is right. The thing we are talking about tonight is a part of the great fight we are carrying on, and it represents a forward and an upward look, a pushing onward." Bois goes on to set forth a call to action that was as urgent as it was beautifully articulated. He asks the attendees, again, a room full of capital I important Black folk, what they really wanted out of life, out of their work. If you tonight should suddenly become full-fledged Americans, if your color faded, color line here in Chicago was miraculously forgotten. Suppose too you became at the same time rich and powerful. What is it that you would want? What would you immediately seek? It was a question about their conception of freedom, which Du Bois went on in his remarks to define not in terms of status or material possessions or other things, but in terms of that thing that I had sat wondering about on that first night in the field: beauty. There has come to us, he said, a vision, us Black Americans, a vision of what the world would be if it were really a beautiful world, a world where people know, where people create, where they realize themselves, and where they enjoy life. It is that sort of a world we want to create for ourselves and for all America. A little later, what has this beauty to do with the world? It has beauty to do with capital T truth and capital G goodness, with the facts of the world and the right actions of men. Nothing, the artists rush to answer. They may be right. I am but an humble disciple of art and cannot presume to say I am one who tells the truth and exposes evil and seeks with beauty and for beauty to set the world right, that somehow, somewhere, eternal and perfect beauty sit above truth and right. I can conceive, but here and now, in this precarious world in which I work, they are for me unseparated and inseparable. When Du Bois delivered these remarks, of course, he had already walked, as he wrote, the white hot roads of rural Tennessee, about 50 miles east of Nashville, seeing them lazily rise and fall under the burning July sun until he found the little schoolhouse where he worked at during his first couple of summers at Fisk. He had, of course, already graduated high school in Massachusetts, earned his undergraduate degree from Fisk, and became first Black Ph.D. from Harvard. He had already been invited by the University of Pennsylvania to conduct a study of the all-Black 7th Ward in Philadelphia. He'd already written The Philadelphia Negro, which, thanks to the work of scholars like Alden Morris and Earl Wright, and I know that there are others, is now more widely recognized for the pioneering text that it is. He'd already been to Paris, 1900. He'd been tasked with curating an exhibit which he called American Negro, which included nearly 400 images of Black folks, as well as these really, to me, gorgeous and resonant figures and graphs of all of the realities, many of them challenges that Black folks were carrying, especially Black folks in the South. By 1926, Du Bois had already spent time at Atlanta University, establishing and running the Atlanta School of Sociology, also known as the Atlanta Sociological Laboratory, also known as the first American School of Sociology. By 1926, Du Bois had already helped found the Niagara Movement and the NAACP. He'd already been serving the role of the NAACP's Director of Research and Editor-in-Chief of the organization's publication, The Crisis, and he had written books on books on books, not just The Philadelphia Negro, but Soul's Black Folk, Darkwater, The Talented Tent, and I know that there are a lot of other things. All of that to say, by the time he took the stage at the conference, Du Bois had already made himself into, from my perspective, the bluest of blue chip sociologists. And yet art had been all up and through his work. Have y'all read Souls of Black Folk? Have you seen the maps and figures? Have you looked over the images in the Paris exposition? Du Bois was a blue chip sociologist. He saw himself, I would say, he wouldn't, as an artist too. And he talked like it. On that day in 1926, Du Bois had chosen to talk about art, about the imperative of making beautiful things. And later that year, he'd chosen to publish those remarks in Crisis under the title Criteria for Negro Art. Neither the remarks nor his decision to publish them were happenstance. There had been a debate playing out as the 1920s, just a few generations after chattel slavery, Black folks still being lynched, Jim Crow. And there is, at the same time, and as always, an explosion of creative energy and output from a tapestry of Black writers, artists, and musicians, the Harlem Renaissance. Many of these writers, artists, and musicians are thinking about the purpose of their work. They too were talking, and rather debating about the purpose, the imperative of the art that they were making. On one side of the debate are folks like the new Negro himself, Alan Locke, who argued forcefully and beautifully that not all art need advance a social purpose. We should not expect art, this is Locke, to answer or solve our sociological or anthropological questions. We must judge, create, and consume it largely in terms of its universal values. In that famous essay, Art or Propaganda, we get, in our spiritual growth, genius and talent must more and more choose the role of group expression, or even at times the role of free individualistic expression. And the word must choose art and put aside propaganda. Propaganda, think art in the service of some greater goal, not like fake news, which is what we hear and think about probably today. Art for art's sake. And on the other side are folks like Du Bois, who articulated his position most forcefully toward the end of his remarks that day in 1926. Thus, it is the duty of Black America to begin this great work of the creation, the preservation, the realization of beauty, and we must use in this work all the methods that men have used before. And what have been the tools of the artist in times gone by? First of all, he has used capital T, truth, not for the sake of truth, not as a scientist seeking truth, but as one upon whom truth eternally thrust itself, as the highest handmaid of imagination, as the one great vehicle of universal understanding. The apostle of beauty thus becomes the apostle of truth and right, not by choice, but by inner and outer compulsion. Thus all art is propaganda and ever must be. Despite the wailing of the purists, I do not care a damn for any art that is not used for propaganda. Du Bois had used the platform of the conference where all the capital I important Black folks had got together to again argue for a conception of art as a means to an end, not an end itself. I say again because Du Bois had made versions of this point before and would after. For instance, just a year before, he'd said a similar thing: art is a tool that could and should be used in the pursuit of capital F freedom. And he saw beauty as the tool's force, art as the instrument, beauty as the sound. If art can be transformative, Du Bois, I think, is suggesting beautiful art will. This, I think, my favorite line of any Du Bois that I've read. And actually, I think I heard this the first time at Southern's. Dr. Danielle Purefoy was giving a talk, I think this was in New Orleans, maybe like 2018, or at least that was the first time where it really penetrated, like really affected me. I am the one who tells the truth, exposes evil, and seeks with beauty and for beauty to set the world right. Boys like me is imagining beauty as an output, as pretty things that we make and admire because they are pretty. And importantly, I think critically, he's allowing for an idea of beauty as a method. And what is a method but a practice? And what is a practice but something that you do? Something that maybe you don't know how to do at first. You learn. You try out what you learned over and over and over, and you get it wrong, and you work. You maybe get better at it. A method. Beauty, Du Bois suggests, is how the artist performs their highest duty to join truth in the pursuit of freedom. And this This idea that beauty could be a method of social transformation. I want to say that this is what that impulse had been inside of me, the wandering thought about making something beautiful that stirred itself up that evening in 2014. It is January 16th, 2020. A couple of months before the world changed, less than a week before the start of the spring semester of my 4th year as assistant professor of sociology, Southern Studies, University of Mississippi. 5.5 years earlier, July 2014, I sat at that open front wood desk, pushed to the window, facing all the pretty houses, wondering for a beat about making something beautiful. And then I pushed that thought aside and followed that good blue chip training I'd gotten at UNC. And when it's all said and done, I collected a lot of data, written that up into a dissertation that I had defended in March of 2017, actually like 6 years and a few days ago. And then I rewrote it entitled like the Blues, which on that day in January, I was about to hit send on like the final draft, but you know, you get edits and such afterwards. But before hitting send, I went on a run, a little trail in Oxford, and like I had been doing for probably the last month of writing a book, as I'm running, I am remembering that question from all that time ago. What's life like for Black folks living in the contemporary South, the South that I knew? And I'm remembering all the people who had told and showed me the answer, who told me that yes, the Delta, they ain't talk like this, but the Delta is a precarious place, but that there was also beauty. That is a method of being and doing. There was a craftiness, a way of seeing and seeking truth, of rolling their eyes at the audacity of racism, of having their own gumption about themselves, to live. I thought about the folks who knew in their bones and from their lives how stakeholders in the Delta seem to have pulled off the ultimate okie-doke, one that is a familiar practice of white racism, where you take some terrible thing that you are responsible for. In this case, the Delta's history of chattel slavery, espionage, racial violence, wage theft, which have bred the more contemporary challenges that Black folks in the region were faced with. You take the terrible thing that you are responsible for and you try to figure out how to squeeze more advantage from it. That was, Black folks in Clarksdale told me, what had been going on with the town's blues tourism development agenda. So in the early 1980s, there's this statewide decision from the governor on down in Mississippi to turn towards hospitality and heritage tourism as a way to kickstart the state's and especially the Delta region's economy. And so from the 80s through the early 2000s, you see this explosion of blues clubs and performance venues and heritage markers. And in 2003, you get the Mississippi Blues Commission. Developments, 40 years of development that you gotta read, you just gotta go talk to some people. Which is what I had done and which is what I was remembering on that day in January as I'm preparing to finish and hit send on the book manuscript. I'm remembering Miss woman I call Miss Irene Sanderford, 71-year-old Black woman, rest in peace, passed away in 2016. Her name is Bobby Fair, which I have shared elsewhere. This is who I start the book with. What's the guy that sings Mom's Apple Pie? This is her asking me, her voice like the morning quiet and still and warmer than usual. I like him, I love him. We were sitting in her office, a front room in a funeral home on the backside of Clarksdale, Mississippi. I know this song, so I sing it. And as I clapped and carried on, Miss Irene smiled and rested back in her seat, stiff chair behind a heavy desk. Her demeanor had been reserved and guarded for most of the morning. At 71 years old, she was like that most of the time, but our exchange about her favorite song had stirred something different, laughter, both hers and mine. A few moments later, something else stirred, a soft but unflinching glare from her to me, a moment of quiet, a thought that could not go unsaid. Her voice was a whisper, somehow both tentative and absolute. Mind you, this conversation with Miss Irene is the turning point. This is in October of 2014. This is a few months after I get to the field. First few months for grad students here doing ethnographic work, if you early on and you feel like you don't know what you're doing, I don't know if that's right or wrong, but that was me from July to October and really for much longer. But this conversation in October where this woman says, I don't like the blues, right after saying, I love this guy who sings this Southern Soul blues song. There was a mismatch. That became my question. I'm on the run, 2020. Remembering all these folks that I've talked to. I'm remembering 27-year-old, who I call W.E.B in the book, a blues musician who helped give me this beautiful language for thinking about how difficult it was to live in a precarious place like Clarksdale, how easy that made it for him to do his beautiful thing on the guitar, which one summer day in 2015, I'm watching from close by, in front of a local music store. He goes, it's hard here. Everything here hard. The school system here is bad, all the high poverty and the jobs are doing more hiring and firing is hard. Take my mama and my daddy, they work their whole life and still struggle. Go around here one day, he says, and you're gonna see what I'm talking about. Go around here and you're gonna see just how hard it is. W.E.B pulls his guitar closer to him, leaned and held his ear downward like he was listening for something that he didn't want nobody else to hear. Put it like this, you're born here, you live here, you've been through the blues for real. I ain't just gotta play the blues. I don't have to, but how hard it is here makes it easy. I'm remembering 45-year-old Alan McIntosh, I call him Mac, who I met in his office not too far from downtown Clarksdale. Mac, who helped me understand one way that local black folks were thinking about or defining the blues. I define the blues as, to me, going through them hard times back in the day, going through them and learning from them and getting out of them before they get too deep on you. As we're talking, I can't tell if Mac's tone, like he's a preacher, was born of reverence and appreciation or melancholy, or perhaps it was some combination. Do we want to remember that? This is Mac talking. The hard times. Yeah, he answered. We make the best of those times. We learn from those times, living that country life. We all had it like that. We all had to go through that, you know? But do we want to remember that? Hard times? Being poor, struggling, doing bad like that? No. We ain't the blues no more. We ain't that no more. I'm remembering the 27-year-old BT, who I call Bois Shumpert, who was supposed to meet me at a blues show, at this blues show, one night. It was a Saturday night during the biggest blues festival of the year, And he didn't come, as y'all can see, like a lot of black folks in Clarksdale didn't come unless they had to clock in. And I fussed at him, not for real, but I fussed at him about it. And his answer gave me the beautiful language for talking about something I'd noticed in just about every blues place in town. Man, I thought you was coming to the show, I said. Half shouting, half laughing, he half smiled. I told you I was going to revival with mama. Then he half looked at me, but really just kept looking at the road. We're on the way to the casino. His face, like the road was, still. We don't be out there, man, this I'm talking. That's for the white folks. I'm remembering 52-year-old Dionne Atkinson Knowles, who I saw just about every day when I was living in Clarksdale. I got a bad sweet tooth, and she worked at the gas station that was closest to where I was living. I saw her every day, and we talked every day. And one day she gave me beautiful language to make sense of how local folks thought about the town's ongoing development agenda. She saw as hypocritical, problematic, the attention that development projects, like there was this new thing happening not too far from the store where she worked. She saw as hypocritical and problematic the attention that those sorts of projects received, while local social institutions, hospital bankruptcies, school districts, they take over. The little red light that's not too far from my house hadn't been working for 2 weeks. While local social institutions continue to suffer the consequences of the town's and region's economic profile and state and local government disinvestment. She said, all that blues development will say, but Aggie, which is a historically black high school in the town, but Aggie about to close down. It just don't add up. Visibly agitated, Dionne eventually gave her comments a bookend. I'm not really a blues person, she said. It's just not my thing. The way I see it, you got the city putting all this money into a festival or building up downtown. How can you build up a community from that? This ain't just a blues place. Bring in something more, build something up for these kids to keep them off the streets. Here it's just the same old, same old. You just get tired of it after so long. I remembered all that time I spent writing about methods, showing my receipts, right, as we say. All that I had done in the 5 years that it had taken to figure out what I was doing to do it, and then to figure out what I'd found and doing all the interviews and observations and demographic and archival data. And I'm remembering what I'd written in my journal on that first night in the field. I wonder if I'll be able to say something beautiful. And how by that day in January, I thought I had figured something out. I got it wrong from the beginning. First line. That was my conclusion, that there had been something wrong with the wandering, especially with the wondering about making beautiful things. And in the prelude, what I call the prelude in the book, I go on to explain that thinking. I had gone to Mississippi from UNC, where I was working toward a Ph.D. in sociology. I got there green and ambitious, ever reminded of what somebody had told me one time about UNC. It was a place that made blue chip sociologists. Ever reminded of what somebody else had told me another time about blue chip sociologists. They don't go nowhere to say. They go to show and then tell. I got it wrong, that's what I wrote. I only wanted to tell, or as I wrote, say something beautiful. It's March 30th, 2023. Third month of sabbatical, halfway through my second year as associate professor of sociology at University of Virginia. And I definitely still think I got something wrong in I Don't Like the Blues. And I think I got it wrong from the beginning. And I still think the wrong was in the wondering. But not that. The wrong was not that I had wondered about making something beautiful. I was wrong because I had not wondered more. I was wrong because I thought the wondering was incomplete, not fully fleshed out. I was wrong in that I had not come to see, as Dionne Brand writes in the map to the door of no return, writing as an act of desire. Desire as one of the most beautiful of things. She writes, why does someone enclose a set of apprehensions within a book? Why does someone else open that book if not because of the act of wanting to be wanted, to be understood, to be seen, to be loved? And desire is also an act of reading, of translation. Brand writes, the poet Joy Harju writes, nearly everyone had left that bar in the middle of winter except the hardcore. It was the coldest night of the year. Every place shut down, but not us. Of course, we noticed when she came in. We were Indian ruins. She was the end of beauty. How in those lines there is, this is Brand writing, clear-eyed dread, such deeply mocking knowledge, and that too is desire. How those lines read beauty and desire into any given night, in any place. Trailer park, wasteland, rural rum shop, she-bin, sports bar, speakeasy, piss and beer reeking dive, little country place in Mississippi. Beauty walks in on any given night, even with the history against you in any hard-scrabble place. Beauty walks in, the ruin of history visited on the people. Don't wipe out the steadfastness of beauty, not a naive beauty, but a hard one. Beauty, it seems, is constantly made. There you go again, that idea of beauty as something that you do, as a method of close attention, of vulnerability, of crafting, of narrative, of being brave enough to try some of those wild ideas that we have winding around in our heads. This has been my practice. If I had more time today, I'd talk about some of the work that I've been doing since the dissertation I defended in 2017, and there is this larger than life feeling of freedom that is weighing me down for weeks and weeks and weeks. I'm emotional. 2018, I write a profile for the Bitter Southerner, the Hill Country Blues singer. I write a few stories about Mississippi for CNN, do a TED Talk. In 2019, super active on the campus of the University of Mississippi, student organizations. 2020, I write or direct a short film, I do another in 21. Ain't nothing fancy. That's how, this is a really head-ass talk. It sounds like I'm, just talking about some of the work post dissertation, post the confines that I feel as a grad student. Maybe that's a conversation for the Q&A. Beauty as method. This has been my practice since the moment I was done with the Ph.D. I've worked to give that wandering boy a long time ago, not just 2014, but a long time ago, the artist, the space he needs to use the tools of our discipline to chase the truth about Black life in the South, the Black South that I knew. In 1940, the Bois. In 1930, he is working on Dusk of Dawn. 1940, I think September. It's a pub date. And there is, to me, this really provocative exchange between him and his fictitious white friend, Roger Van Diamond. I'm guessing this is how you pronounce his last name. Bois, you would not have the courage to live 1 hour as a black man in America, or as a Negro in the whole wide world, is what Bois says to Roger. Ah, yes, I know what you whisper to such accusation. You say dryly that if we had good sense, we would not live either. And that the fact that we do submit to life as it is and yet laugh and dance and dream is but another proof that we are idiots. This is the truly marvelous way in which you prove your superiority by admitting that our love of life can only be intelligently explained on the hypothesis of inferiority. What finer tribute is possible to our courage? What great works of art have we made? Very few. The pyramids, bronzes of Benin, Spears, the bongo, when Melinda sings, and the sorrow song she is always singing, oh yes, and the love of her dancing. And here we are again, Du Bois's vision for art. But art is not simply works of art, outputs. It is the spirit that knows beauty, that has music in its soul and the color of sunsets in its handkerchiefs, that can dance on the flaming world and make the world dance too. I'm remembering that beautiful call for papers that Dr. Shana Redmond wrote for last year's annual meeting of the American Studies Association. The roof is on fire, she writes. Invites strategies that draw our attention to and command a multi-sensory, multi-register engagement with the world as it is and as we want it to be. As a scene of devastation and one of shared euphoric incantation, the scorched and scorching room in which we will gather holds many possibilities. May all who enter be prepared to, and I have to say it how she wrote it, let that motherfucker burn. It's hot in here. We've been in this nation's burning house of integration for 2 generations and I can't breathe. The fire that encircles us all is higher and hotter here. I'm frightened by how close and how distant we are. Terrifyingly familiar and unfamiliar all at the same time. Firsts are no marker of progress when the count is all that matters. My limbs are laden by promises and don't float no more. It's hot in here. On the block, that is. Too many in blue, too many deputized with something or nothing to prove. There are no humans involved after all. Who will ask questions? We broke. We hungry. We newly, we though never completely, and that may be the best thing we got going. It's hot in here. The roof, the roof, the roof. She writes, you know the rest, or you should. The structure will not hold very long. It wasn't meant for us anyway. Touch the beat. Move without instruction. Abandon your isolation. We've held on to it too long. Take my hand as we lift ourselves from this time of war into the first 5 minutes and 30 seconds of eternity. Southerns, the world is on fire. I don't say that in the alarmist tone that can be tempting, but it ain't my opinion. It's thick description. From police violence against black and brown people, the inability of poor and working class folks like hundreds of people I talked to in the Mississippi Delta, inability of those folks to make a living, school shootings, book bannings. Yeah, I could keep going. Politicians who have more guns than they do humanity. For me, the moment doesn't move or quiet or smother the imperative of making beautiful science that looks good, sounds good, science in the service of social transformation. I talked a lot about art. I could have been talking about science. I said artists. I could have been saying us, scientists. Question. The world is on fire. And it is. And if we have to live in the flames, what do we do? If by dance, the Bois, we get the same language from Dr. Redman, if by dance, the thought is that we make beautiful things in the service of our survival, in the service of our humanity. And this ain't, I don't gotta wonder about this one. I know what I'm gonna do. I appreciate it. Thank y'all so much. Really looking forward to